Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the WatchWell Podcast. This is Parker, and I am with my co-host, Nick. Nick's already laughing.
Smiling.
You're
There's
smiling.
no laughter,
No,
just smiling.
no laughter. So
Mm-mm.
what's funny already, Nick?
I'm just ready to go.
You ready to go?
I'm happy to be doing this.
Right. Me too. So we are glad to be back. How was your week, Nick?
It's been a good, somewhat busy week. Today was a pretty busy day. So, but yeah, overall, it's been a really good week.
That's great. Any ups, downs, both?
I don't know. I don't know yet.
You
I
don't
don't
know
have
yet?
anything for you in that
Yeah.
regard right now.
Yeah, I'm actually
Not good at the small talk.
No, not good. You're
No,
just ready
not
to
good
get
at the
into.
small
You're
talk.
just ready to get
Yeah.
into the movie. Is there any ratings and stuff? I know some of the normal stuff that we do. They didn't have any information on the movie, so
Yeah. So plugged in reviews. This movie, plugged in movies, has a review. Okay, so you can go in and read the full review about the content, what it contains, and things like that. But what they don't have that we usually include is the content cautions. Like an example would be a movie for kids is really light and it's light across the board, or it's heavy for kids and it's light for adults. Like that's what they don't have. But regardless of that, I thought maybe get your opinion on what you think. You know, it's rated PG-13. What do you think is reasonable for somebody to watch this movie in terms of like age, kids, adults, teenagers?
uh, I'm just going off of trying to what I remember from the movie. It's a long movie. I think that
It
I would
is.
have to say that I would say 13 to 15.
Yeah.
Final answer.
I think I go down to 10.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
maybe it's too long to sit through at 10, but I mean in terms of the content, I think I go down to 10.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
What's your reasoning behind 10-year-olds?
I think I just feel like it's the content in the movie. Anything that seems inappropriate for a 10-year-old is done in a way that a 10-year-old's not going to see it for what it is anyway.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I guess my thought went straight to the um the sex scene in the movie.
Mhm.
But because they're entangling their hair braids, maybe
Yeah.
maybe you're more correct than what I originally would have thought.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I don't see it as a problem for younger kids to watch.
yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. So maybe I stand corrected.
Or you just disagree, which is okay too.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's fair. Fair enough. Cool. Let's get into the movie here. Nick, do you have any first thoughts? Any first scenes you want to recall?
Well, I don't know about any any individual scenes necessarily, but one of the observations that I have at the beginning, um, not at the beginning of the movie, but so one of the first things that pops to mind is it's kind of a religious and spiritual hodgepodge of things all wrapped up into the movie.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
there's just so many spiritual aspects, which makes sense. I mean, you're writing a movie about life on another planet. It makes sense that spirituality and religious belief would be part of that, and you would craft something to go along with that. The other thing that comes to mind is that this is just Pocahontas.
It really is. I was going to say that if
Yeah,
you weren't going to.
yeah. It's just Pocahontas.
Just the reverse.
That's the story.
Yep, you're right.
That's the story. Um, you know I'm all of a sudden blanking on the name of the alien species. The starts with an N. Navi, is that what it is?
Yeah, I think that sounds
The
right.
Navi. I mean, they are. You can hear in the name that they're just, they're the Native Americans, right?
Yeah.
Native Navi.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Just just not
it's
just
just
not the
Pocahontas.
just not the
Yeah,
Americans.
it's Pocahontas with some really really cool special effects and technology that it took to make the movie.
Yeah, and I retract what I said earlier. I didn't mean the reverse. I just meant the alien version of Pocahontas.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
just
So
the
I don't
alien.
know. So what's your opinion of the movie overall?
Overall, first, it's very entertaining.
Yeah.
I really like the idea. Um, I would say, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can say much more. I just really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. I thought that just from an epic standpoint of the movie, it was just it's a masterpiece from the visual effects, the audio, the scenes, the way um oh, what's his face, the director,
James Cameron.
yeah, James Cameron, thank you, the way that he was able to capture space, like
Mm-hmm.
the vastness of that world. I mean, even the scene. Oh yeah, and we always usually talk about spoilers in the episodes. So this movie's been out for a while. You don't really have any
Yeah,
excuse. Go
13
watch the movie. It's
years.
been 13 years. So, but we are gonna stick to our spoiler alert. But nevertheless, we I just really enjoyed his ability to submerge you into that world and make it believable.
Yeah, the visuals are amazing. Like the floating mountains,
Yep.
like the massive tree that's kind of the center of everything. Like the visuals of all of it are incredible. And one of my I think the best scene is also the saddest scene, which is the scene where
They're blowing.
they're blowing up that tree
Yeah,
and the tree falls. That is incredible.
it's
That is
awesome.
awesome.
It's absolutely
Yeah.
incredible.
Do you remember? Do you remember seeing it in 3D at the theater?
I do. I actually think I went and saw it a couple of times in
Yeah,
3D. I think
I
did we
think
go
you went
together?
at least once.
Yeah.
I think we did.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I think
Yeah.
we went to an IMAX 3D up near you
Yeah, I think it was in
and saw
Michigan.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it came out. Um, but the 3D was awesome. Like I remember the in theater, the 3D was awesome for this movie. But the thing I absolutely hated, has nothing to do with this one. Has nothing to do with Avatar. But it's that for 5 years it seemed like every movie that came out after Avatar had to be 3D,
Yeah,
and
I don't know what
none of them were any good. Like none
yeah.
of them were any good in 3D because the reason it worked for Avatar was because a new type of 3D was developed to film it. Like it was designed to be that way. And then you have all these other studios who are like, here's the next big movie. Oh, let's put it in 3D
Yeah.
because maybe we can charge a little bit more for tickets and
Yeah,
they'll
for
show
sure.
up. So Avatar was really good, but I hate that it kind of started that trend of 3D things. I think it's since died out. I haven't heard about a 3D movie in a long time.
No, I'm actually surprised that the Avengers haven't dibble dabbled into 3D yet because they're trying to do
Well, the
everything.
first one did.
Well, I guess that's true.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
first one did. Um, I wonder if the sequel to Avatar is going to be in 3D.
I
I
don't
wonder
know.
if they filmed it the same way.
It looks really good.
Yeah,
Like the trailer looks interesting. It'll be interesting to see a bunch of new creatures from the water and stuff like that.
yeah.
It's like the way of the sea or the way of the water or something like that, isn't it?
Way of the water.
Way of the
Yeah,
water.
yeah.
Um. So, what's your take on the theme of the movie?
Well, I think overall the theme. I think it's a. I think the story that he's telling, and there's a few other things I'll bring up, but I think the core of the story that he wanted to tell is about the evil explorers who came and killed all the Native Americans
Mm-hmm.
and then destroyed their way of life. I think that's the basic story because you have and then kind of wanted to take all the resources that like the natural resources that the Native Americans had built up, and so basically it's the story of I guess Columbus or some of those other well-known
maybe.
explorers who go into. It just kind of seems like that exact story, or maybe it is just literally Pocahontas copied and put into space. But
Right.
um,
I
I
mean,
think that's basically what he's.
yeah.
I think what he's saying is imperialism, explore that type of exploration where you go in, you invade somewhere, and you take resources. I think he's trying to communicate about how evil and how awful that is.
Yeah, I think it. I guess my personal take is that it is more Pocahontas, just copied and pasted because
Mm-hmm.
you got John Smith, and then you
Mm-hmm.
have Jake Sully.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
the names definitely,
Yeah.
uh, the name definitely matches
Yeah.
on some level. Um,
And then the resource that everybody wants from Pandora is unobtainium.
yeah. Yeah, and that's
Un-
the only type of element from the periodic table that Iron Man could find.
unobtainium.
Unobtainium, like super creative.
It's the
Every great movie has its flaws.
worst name for something ever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The screenwriters just mailed it in that day. We spent like
Yeah.
6 years making this movie. We're calling it Unobtainium. We're gonna go take a nap.
Right.
That's how
Yeah.
that
They
conversation went.
they definitely spent a lot more time on the special effects and all of that stuff than they did on the writing.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
for
And on
sure.
the story even.
Yeah,
Because it really is just Pocahontas
yeah.
copied. But I do think James Cameron inserted some more about kind of you have the I mean you could even say I don't know I have no idea what James Cameron's political
Yeah.
beliefs are or anything like that. But it seems like from the movie, he's kind of coming from a worldview where the foundation of Western civilization is evil.
Mm-hmm.
That, or, and if not that, then he's coming from a worldview where he says all cultures are legitimately good.
Mm-hmm.
And any culture change or any shift in cultures or trying to change cultures is inherently evil. Like, would you see that in the movie?
Yeah. I didn't really take it that way though. I'm not devaluing any of that. I think all of those are good points. But what I took more from it from a to kind of jump into more of deeper some deeper thought. I think anybody, I don't know. So like since the fall, there's wars, there's battle over resources. I mean, you're just not going to get
Mm-hmm.
away from that. People need resources, and it kind of got me thinking more philosophically about, um, the greatest commandment: love God, love neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to thinking about Acts and how the early church, the early Christian church, shared everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really interesting to me that because of the depravity of man, and our, I guess, for lack of a better term, our geographical location, we have a certain amount of resources native to that geographical location, and we just happen to be blessed to be the ones there.
Right.
And then obviously, you get into commerce and different things like that. But it's just interesting that the I guess the line or the metaphor between Avatar and Pocahontas and exploration. The whole point is Pocahontas. The Europeans were looking for gold.
Mm-hmm.
In Avatar, they're looking for unobtainium.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the whole thing's just kind of interesting to me, and it kind of makes you think a little deeper.
Yeah.
Share everything, love God, love neighbor. Should we fight over resources?
Right. Right.
But the depravity of man, it's what the Bible teaches. We're
Yeah.
going to hoard our resource because we want as much as that as we can, but we also want everyone else's. So
Right.
there's
Right.
just a greed and I guess, a level of not ever being satisfied.
Yeah. And you definitely see that in I don't remember his name, but he's the business guy in the movie. He's the one kind of he's calling the shots, not the military guy.
Giovanni Ribisi.
Yeah, he's the actor, but I can't
Yeah.
remember the character's name.
I'll think of it here in a second.
I love him as an actor. Even back to like he plays Phoebe's younger brother in Friends. He's incredible as an actor. But he kind of personifies that greed and that never being satisfied and always having to push forward for profit, and that you've talked about, that just continual need for what somebody else has. He's an example of that in the movie.
His name's
Definitely.
Parker, ironically. The character's name is Parker.
Parker. There you go.
There, we'll never forget it now.
Yeah. I don't know how I forgot it to begin with.
I don't know. I'm really the one to blame.
Yeah.
I think his name's only mentioned a couple of times though, to our defense.
Yeah.
Cool. So how do we apply that thought? If we just kind of extrapolate that a little bit, Nick. The first thing that comes to mind is a political conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Being Christians, sometimes it's really hard to vote.
Mm-hmm.
But if we talk about how, obviously everything's hyper politicized. But if we're talking about viewing stories through the lens of truth, you also have to view life through the lens of truth. And that's the whole point, right? Is to be practical about the podcast, to be practical about our faith, because ultimately that's what we're called to do. So I guess the first conversation that we could open up in talking about is how do we balance, the right and the left, and the way that presents itself in relation to the movie is, and if you want to add to this, Nick, you can, go feel free, but the right is usually like far right. You get greedier. It's more about, making a buck at the expense of other people. Far left is more of the socialist argument, and different things like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the movie definitely shows that.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
anyone who's watching the movie would say that Parker is a Republican.
Yeah.
And the Navi and then the scientists who help them are all liberals.
Yeah.
Right?
And I would actually argue against that, though. I would argue against the Navi being liberals, because there is an aspect like commerce wouldn't. You can refute me if you think that I'm wrong, but and maybe there's a little debate back and forth here, but in a perfect society, if everyone only took what they absolutely needed, there would be no need for commerce.
Yeah.
Because everything would be, everybody would work and would share the resources. There wouldn't need to be any government control of production. It would just be you work, private sector, and then everything is shared. And everyone love God, love neighbor. If you're going to love your neighbor, you're going to get your neighbor what you need.
Mm-hmm.
That's the early church.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So because we're sinful and because we're not that way, you have these two far extremes where there's the right, I guess the evil Republican who doesn't care about neighbor and doesn't care about God.
Or that's the accusation.
That's the accusation. Right? The accusation is the evil Republican who only wants money, greed, as much as I can make, and make everybody work, and so I can benefit, the most money out of my business or whatever. And then the other side of the spectrum would be the liberal saying, I want the government to control everything, take everything, and then disperse it based off the need.
But the
accusation.
So like what you said, the accusation from left to right is greed, take. Yeah. And the accusation from right to left is handout.
Correct. Yep. Exactly.
And both are basically accusing of the same thing, just going about it just each side's going about it in a different way.
in a different extreme.
One-
Correct. Yeah, but
One
the
is
common
one type of greed, another is another.
but
And
the
each
common
side
ground.
sees themselves as the hero.
Correct. Well, I wouldn't even say the hero. I would just say they think that they think that their way is the best way to solve the problem.
Right.
The common ground is the evil Republican and the evil liberal
Are both greedy.
are both greedy. They both aren't following God.
Yeah. So then what?
So then
now
what?
what?
So now what? And I don't
Because
think
some
that's
people would say
Go ahead.
people would say that the answer is just be in the middle.
So then we get into neutrality. So how do you handle that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Is
it effective in our current setup? Because I refuse to believe, like, this is just me personal. Now I'm talking opinion, not necessarily scripture, but my opinion is that we're not a two-party system. We're just a two-party dominated system. And some people may, they may, what's the word? They may get me on a semantics debate, but we definitely have more than two parties. Just
right.
the majority of people vote for those two parties. The mainstream.
100 years.
Yeah, years and years and years.
Right. I mean, who was this is a question you probably don't know the answer to. I know I don't, but who was the last president to not be Democrat or Republican?
I'm going to look it up.
Because all of Congress is measured by that balance as well, right? We don't say, sometimes there might be an independent in Congress, but we don't say this is the balance of power in terms of independence, right?
Yeah,
because they don't have it at all.
Apparently the 13th president of the United States, according to whitehouse.gov, Millard Fillmore. He was a member of the Whig Party.
Okay.
50 to 53, 1850 to 1853.
Okay. So that's the last time that somebody that wasn't in either of these two parties, our current parties.
Yeah, I just typed in last president, neither Republican or Democrat, and that's what came up. So,
okay.
If I'm wrong,
maybe
fact check me in the comments. Get the comment section rolling. It's been kind of crazy lately. The last couple of days, we've had people call the Christian religion a cult.
But yet say you need to reach a higher consciousness.
Yeah, and then we've had other people agree with that former comment. We've got another person who was super supportive, but just a little disclaimer for the comment section. We got to remember that at least Nick, you can tell me what you think, but as far as I sit right now, we got to remember that as Christians, it's vitally important to remember that non-believers aren't the enemy. So that's why, like, from the standpoint of this podcast and where we kind of position ourselves on the comment section is we want good, healthy discourse. The person that commented second was very respectful. This was actually the comment that didn't call us a cult. He just agreed with the previous comment, but he was very respectful. There's been a lot of respect in the comments. I think it's really, really important for Christians to be welcoming to that, welcome the opposing viewpoints, and let the good ideas stomp out the bad ideas, as long as we remember that we're all image bearers of God, and we, whether you believe it or not, because that's the truth, we just need to remember and put an emphasis on who the true enemy is and not our fellow man. Love God, love neighbor, which we'll get into that. Yeah. Maybe it's a good pivot point for that.
Yeah, and this might even, I think this is a worthwhile tangent a little bit too, because I think a lot of times Christians will fall into the same type of name calling and just general like negativity, especially in online comments, like whether it be on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or wherever it is, fall into like the same general negativity that anyone else would when there's opposition. And I think it's because Christians are afraid of opposition. I think it's out of fear. I think it's out of like, I don't know how to respond to the ideas you just presented to me, so I'm going to lash out. And I'm going to call you a name. I'm going to call you stupid. I'm going to call you ignorant and things like that. And I think part of the reason we do this podcast is to equip Christians to not be afraid and to be able to engage any conversation, right? You don't have to be afraid of any type of opposition that exists, even if you don't know how to answer, if you don't know how to come up with an answer, it's okay to just back off.
Yep, it's okay.
You don't have to say something,
but it's
right?
but there's also kind of a an important point in that is if you do call Jesus your Savior and you do follow Jesus, it's your responsibility to have an account for the faith.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
exactly.
it's in First Peter, where First Peter, no, not First Peter.
Always be prepared to give a reason.
Is it First Peter?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So I was right.
First Peter or Second Peter.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a couple.
Somebody can fact check that too for us.
But it's your responsibility. So if you're ultimately fearful, to Nick's point, it's absolutely okay to back off and just understand, like, be aware, but then also
learn.
Like, figure it out.
Yeah.
Like,
learn.
take it on yourself. This faith is not a blind faith at all. It's not a blind faith. You can have confidence. And that's confidence. From the Latin confide means with faith. So I think it's really important for Christians to own their faith and not just
for sure.
Get their Starbucks, go to church on Sunday, and call it a day.
Right.
Definitely study it, and study it, like you would die for it, because we have to pick our cross up every day and die to our own self, and that's probably the first step in the discipline in order, to do that.
Yeah.
So,
and we would love to be a part of that process, right?
Absolutely.
We would love
Absolutely.
to have the privilege of helping people to answer those things. So that's
absolutely
part of why we do what we do. So
right.
I think that was a good tangent. I don't remember where we were before the tangent. But
well,
regardless of that, I think it was a good tangent.
We were kind of hovering around the idea of love God, love neighbor. So if you want to get into that, we can, because that directly relates to the movie. Yeah.
So what would you say? This is rhetorical, so if you have an answer, but if not, that's fine too. But
okay.
What would you say is the primary reason? So resources, obviously, but what makes the human side of this movie so oppositional to the native side?
Well, without thinking much, and maybe I'll stick my foot in my mouth here, but the first thing that comes to mind is, and if you're listening on, the audio version only, like Buzzsprout or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever, I'm using air quotes. It's all in the name of progress. So it comes from a fundamental basis of self-righteousness to think that we are going to come to this land, and I think that there has to be some type of forethought, because whenever you go to someplace new, you're like, oh, what's going to be there? What kind of, especially when you're traveling to outer space, I'm sure that they had tabs on the planet beforehand, and they were kind of watching things. So, with the military involved, there's a lot of tactics and strategy that goes into that. And I know that I'm making kind of a big deal of it, but that's probably what the military would do if they were going to quote unquote invade a planet.
Right.
No differently than they would invade a country.
When a country's invaded.
Yeah. So
you can look over to Russia and Ukraine and see what's going on over there. And yeah.
So I think that to some degree they would have known that there were inhabitants on Pandora, and
right.
There had to be some type of forethought to intellectually believe that, okay, so we found this element. We know it's coming from Pandora. There's inhabitants because we've been surveying or surveilling the planet, but that belongs to us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a self-righteousness that says they're not using it, we're going to go and take it. And then it's even more, we did the podcast on Inception, where it's self-absorption. And it's even more, and it starts to get into idolizing yourself as a god, because Now we find out that the source of the element is underneath their home tree, and we're just going to go take it without regards to anything.
Right.
Those are some initial thoughts. I don't know if that's kind of where you were headed, but
Yeah. I think that's all good stuff, and I think that's a lot of that's really at the core. But so what I had in my mind is, so if I want something from somebody, let's say, let's say my neighbor has a tool that I don't have that I could use. What's the best way for me to go about using that tool?
you walk over, you knock on the door, and humbly ask, "Hey, I don't have this tool, and I'm working on this. Would you mind if I borrowed it if you had it?"
Yeah. And if they say, well, I'm really worried about it being broken, I say, well, could I pay you to borrow it? Could I offer you something so that I can use this? Like there, you can have a conversation and you can negotiate and
Absolutely.
you don't even have to manipulate anybody. And so I think what you see in this movie, at what point did Parker and the military that's represented in the movie, at what point did they just genuinely, humbly acknowledge the Navi's ownership and seek their approval in order to get what they wanted or needed?
Well, I think you saw that there were two different ways, right? There were well, here let me gather my thoughts, because so there's fighting for fighting's sake,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you saw that in the military side of things.
Yep.
So the movie was definitely portraying bad military.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of our protagonists, Jake Sully,
Right.
and the band of rebels that kind of got together with
Mm-hmm.
the doctor, Michelle Rodriguez's character, and then the other guy.
It's really hard to remember the names of the characters.
It
in this
really
movie.
is.
They don't stick out much.
they don't.
I remember Jake Sully, but
Man, I don't remember. Let's see.
I remember the actors
Just to
more than
get it right. So Dr. Grace, Augustine,
Grace. That's right.
Trudy, let's see, Parker, Norm. Norm is the other guy that I couldn't think of. But I think that you have two different sides. So you have the bad humans and the good humans. And the good humans are definitely the 1%, and they end up obviously helping the natives. Go ahead.
Right, but what about Jake?
So I think
Because
yeah.
even though he eventually like falls in love with that people, and specifically the girl, right?
Yeah.
Falls in love with the girl, just like in Pocahontas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But initially, he's just as manipulative as the Parker and the again, I can't remember any names, but Stephen Lang is the actor, but he's
Miles.
he's manipulative. He's just a pawn in their little game, and it's like, okay, this is our attempt at diplomacy, but there's never any real, genuine diplomacy.
So the movie didn't really get into this. Okay, so I'm gonna jump in here, because I don't know if Jake Sully was truly manipulative. I think that he was sold the propaganda that could be sold to any one of us.
Well, yeah.
So
I mean,
he's going to this on orders. It's just orders to him, and it's the next mission, and he's showing up and he's hearing this from his superior officers, and that's what you do in the military. You follow orders, unless they're ordering you to break a law or something. And the good humans. So I do think that there's a pro kind of my team or the military in Jake. But I don't think that he's so I don't think he's as self-absorbed as the leadership.
He's not as self-absorbed at all.
Which, when he gets lost in the jungle of Pandora, he's looking for that journey, because the character Jake's character is definitely depicted. Let me see. He's lost his leg, so he suffered severe loss. And what was it? His brother, his twin brother, that was like the super achiever, and so he was just kind of down and out. He was just a jarhead from the Jarhead clan, and I think that he was looking for something to come alive again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, an adventure to kind of rekindle his spirit and become human again. Honestly, is just to become something or have something to live for.
Well, the
And
way it was sold to him, I think at the beginning of the movie, the quote is "a new start on a new planet."
yeah, and then when he got there, there was even further incentive to, hey, if you do this, I'll get you your legs back.
Mm-hmm.
So there's even further incentive. So I think that he's more of the kind of innocent, caught up in it character. But he's not definitely Colonel Miles or definitely Parker, who's running the show.
Yeah, he's not. I'm not saying he's to the same degree. All I'm saying is, even his role in getting to know them, the the start of that is to serve what he's been told to do, not out of a genuine desire to have diplomacy, right? So he's not there out of a genuine desire to, he becomes this, but to start with, he's not going in as an avatar and getting in with the people for the purpose of actually doing good things.
Well, no,
He's
but
just reporting back
right, but I think
to his bosses.
right, and I think it depicts.
Yeah.
I think it depicts our sinful nature like really well, because you have
Right.
like Jake's caught in the middle. He's been sold this propaganda, most likely, and he has been sold this fresh start. He's get your legs back, and he goes to his superior officers, who he believes who are actually the evil people of the movie, and
Mm-hmm.
then he meets the then he meets Dr. Grace and Norm, and they are definitely there to help the native people. They're there to educate them, to
Yeah.
learn about them, to dive into the culture. So now Jake's got this moral dilemma of, before he even steps into the jungle and meets Natiri, he who do I follow? Do I follow the evil or do I follow the good?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the dilemma that that the movie portrays, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But where I was trying to go with it is there's never a point in the movie where it wasn't going to end in violence towards the Navi tribe. Right? There's never a point where the diplomacy was genuinely an attempt to avoid violence until it was too late.
Right, and I would say because the leaders were dead set on
for sure. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
not trying to. So
I agree.
so why then? And maybe there's some backstory that's not included in the movie or anything like that. But why then would the why would Parker and I guess what's portrayed as the military assume that they were going to have to act out and take forcefully what they wanted before ever even engaging with the Navi people or the Navi species,
Yeah,
tribe,
I don't know.
whatever you want to call them?
I don't know.
So, and that's kind of my point is I think part of it is imagine all the barriers that are in place. It's the same type of barriers. You could go to the Tower of Babel, the same type of divisions and barriers that exist in the Avatar movie um, between the humans and the Navi are the same type of barriers that existed for a very long time between nations.
Mm-hmm.
We speak different languages. We can't understand each other. We have different gestures. We have different ways of communicating. We just don't understand each other. And I think that's part of what's actually going on is rather than seeking to understand, they just know what they want and they're going to take it forcefully. And who cares what it means for the Navi?
Right.
And so that brings up the question is how should we treat people that we don't understand?
Mm-hmm.
How should we engage with people that we don't understand? What is the right way to do that? And that would bring you to, Matthew 22, love God, love neighbor, the greatest commandment. love your neighbor as yourself. How do we practically do that when we don't understand the people that we're engaging with? We don't understand their language. We don't understand their culture. How do we love those people, love them as ourselves?
Right. And we just kind of skipped over the Tower of Babel. Can you just, for people who may be listening that don't even know what that is?
So the Tower of Babel is in Genesis, where it is the account in Scripture of God causing division among man and separating them out. And that's where we get all of the various languages. Their tongues are scrambled. We don't understand each other because of the language barriers and things like that. So that's the Tower of Babel, Babel speaking. So that's where God causes man to not understand each other with language.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it starts in Genesis 11, but I could be wrong. Yeah, that's good stuff, man. So, I guess to answer your point, the Bible has a lot of answers on that, and if you call yourself a Christian, the first thing that comes to my mind is the fruits of the Spirit. Love is patient, kind. If love God, love neighbor is the command, and there are barriers, love requires patience to get through the barriers. And I think part of that, and it's not specifically stated in that verse in Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast. But it does talk about self-control. Giving your neighbor the benefit of the doubt as a presupposition is really important. And not even just your neighbors, but like it helps your marriage. It helps just to be a positive person. It's just approaching conversations, even conflict, with the presupposition that, hey, they didn't intend to do me wrong.
Right.
Is just a good way. It's just a good way to go about it. So
yeah, that's really big, and that speaks to kind of what we were talking about, the divide. The political divide,
yeah, absolutely,
that exists,
absolutely,
and the division that exists right now is, generally speaking, super conservatives, and I'm guilty of this often. Oftentimes, I'm guilty of this, but we'll just think the worst of anyone who's on the other end, on the other side. Anyone who's people on the right will automatically think the worst of people on the left, and rather than engaging the ideas, meaning having conversation about ideas and concepts and philosophies and policy and what will work, what won't work, what is good, what is not good, instead of actually engaging those conversations, it's just, I don't understand you, you're an idiot.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's where it stops. And so if we can actually love our neighbor by talking to them, by engaging their ideas, and not necessarily agreeing, but being ready to actually logically engage. But too many people don't know why they hold the positions that they hold. And because they don't know why they hold the position, they can't answer opposition. If I don't know why I hold conservative policies as best, I don't know why I do that. It's just because. Maybe
really
I just
bad
like
reason.
it traditionally.
Just a really bad, yeah.
Maybe it's, my family was conservative, but I don't know why I hold to those positions. Then I'm going to feel way over my head. I can't communicate with somebody who doesn't hold my positions.
Mm-hmm.
I can't engage those things. I haven't thought about, okay, what is this other side? I haven't, and that doesn't mean coming over to the other side and abandoning your positions. It means being able to explain what you believe, being able to understand what you believe in a way that you can actually converse with somebody who differs from what you believe. Understanding things that are different than you is not the same thing as coming into agreement with those things.
Absolutely.
You can understand things that you don't agree with.
And we, kind of back on the political thing, I know we're still kind of hovering around that, but a lot of us agree on the problems. Where we disagree is on how we solve them.
How you solve them.
And you can't attribute poor motive, because if you look at someone who, and I'm not talking in extremes here, but if you look at the average run of the mill Democrat, a lot of the reasons they vote for the policies that they do is because they want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or that's their intention.
Right.
So on the other side of things, it's the same way. The intention is, on the right, your average Republican would say to help people, it's best that they are independent and self-supporting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're just different ways to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And then that kind of extrapolates the gamut of where you fall, because
Mm-hmm.
some are going to agree with one side more than the other.
Yeah.
But what we just did there is assume the best out of both sides,
Right.
and then what's left is what's the better argument.
Yeah. It's not.
Then you get down to facts and figures.
All liberals just want the United States to fall and become nothing and become a socialist country and
Right.
drown in communism and be like Venezuela and all those things. That's what every liberal wants. They want us to have no freedoms and nothing. And then it's not. To the flip side of that, every Republican just wants an all-white nation with white supremacy, and they're all racist and they don't want any diversity or anything like that. Those accusations that are, I mean, let's be honest, they're common, right? For both sides,
Right.
from one side to the other. Those
Racism is on both sides.
for sure.
Yeah.
But the accusations there, that's not the starting point for conversation,
Absolutely.
right? That's not
No,
the starting
absolutely.
point. Instead of hurling insults at each other, if your idea is truly better, demonstrate it.
Mm-hmm. Communicate it. Yep. Absolutely.
Demonstrate how it's better.
Yep. Absolutely. No, that's really, really good. So love God, love neighbor. So let's jump over to unless you have other things to say, but we could jump over to just the existence of God. And you know, I guess I am going to talk about this. I kind of mentioned this before we started recording, but there's a difference between a being of necessity and a being that is contingent or a contingent thing. Meaning that contingency can't exist within itself. It actually it requires a necessity to exist. A necessary being or a being of necessity can exist within itself. So if we go back to Genesis, it says that within the counsel of his own will, God within the counsel of his own will, right? I believe that's in Genesis. That inherently means that God has always existed, is existing, and will always exist within himself.
Right, and you could even use what are the first three words of the Bible?
In the beginning, yeah.
Well, actually, I meant to say four. In the beginning, God.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of that to say, what would nature be? What would from the Christian perspective, creation? That would be a contingent. That would be a contingent existence.
Yeah, it's contingent upon God creating it.
Correct. As everything that's been created is,
Yeah.
the building is evidence of the builder. You would not just walk downtown New York and just think, oh, that poofed out of nowhere. And I know I'm oversimplifying that a little bit, but that's what it boils down to. So if you have creation, if you have a creation, it's evidence of a creator.
Mm-hmm.
And in Avatar, it's the creation is the God.
Yeah, Avatar is like a big old poster for pantheism.
Right.
That either like you could say it the way you did, that all of creation is God, or another way to say it is that there's this divine substance or energy that encompasses all things, and there's nothing transcendent, there's nothing above or below. Everything is equally divine and intertwined in one. Everything should be connected and one, and it's all divine.
Right.
So
And
it's not necessarily that man worships tree, but that all things are God.
right.
Everything, all things
So,
are divine.
well, that's the theological flaw of the movie, though, right? Is
For
because
sure.
and not from like us critiquing it as Christians, from a spiritual perspective, but just if you just look at the movie within itself, Awa, which is
Mm-hmm.
the god, right? It's the nature, it's the creation and everything in Pandora, and even Norm is quoted. He said it's their deity.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you go to a different planet?
Right.
Is that God sufficient for others?
Yeah. Right.
Can you know? So that's when we get into, is it really God? Is
Yeah.
it how, like, so back on the contingent, Pandora would be contingent. That Awa didn't create Pandora.
Right.
So something higher had to have created it, would be
Yeah.
the argument there, right?
Yeah. But even in the movie itself, like, Jake has to completely upend. They never acknowledge it, but I think, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I just misinterpreted what happened, but Jake has to completely upend the entire belief system of the Na'vi in order to save the Na'vi. So there's a couple moments where, like, the way they're one with, or the visual way that they're one with all of the Pandora and everything on the planet and everything like that is through the connection that they have, right? Through the tail and the connection that,
Their hair.
yeah, the connection that comes in through that. And at one point, they talk about the necessity when it comes to the animals, the necessity of the animal choosing you back, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But the most important part of the movie, in order to get the Na'vi tribe to accept him again, he has to strategize a way to overcome the massive bird,
Yeah.
or whatever you want to call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then become one with that bird.
I think they were called
Not because the
banshees.
bird chose him, and then he flies down and everyone's in amazement.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's the second coming of the previous one to do
it
it.
was
So he completely
Taruk
took away.
Makhtao, or whatever that
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So he completely turned their entire belief system on its end, like completely subverted it. But he had to do it to save those people.
Well,
he
became almost their Messiah, the second
Right.
coming of their Messiah. Yeah.
But he did it through strategy,
Right.
not because there was this divine energy that connected him to the
outside
what
of,
would you even call that animal? I mean, it looks like a pterodactyl, but
I think they're called banshees.
okay,
I think they're called banshees from the movie. But I think it's interesting because you're right. There's no divine outside of just the immaterial sovereignty of maybe Awa would be the claim, because all of those little floating things
Right.
landed on him, and he was like the chosen one.
Yeah.
So outside of that, I 100% agree with you, but I think someone on the other side of it would argue that there was some type of sovereignty being enacted there, that all of that was planned. And
But the thing is, if
it's human,
if it's pantheistic, there is no sovereignty of anything.
Well, yeah,
there is no transcendent being. So even Awa is just is a being within the creation that is one with the people. Like they worship it, they worship it, but they can become one with it, just like they become one with the animals.
Yeah.
And they can connect into it just like they connect into the animals. So it's all one common ecosystem, and it actually takes Jake Sully to do something that does not fit with that ecosystem, that does not fit in with their belief system, in order to save them, because you can't have somebody come in and act heroically in a pantheistic worldview. It's not possible for somebody to do that because there's nothing, because there's no. So one thing about pantheism is if I recently watched a video by a I can't remember her name. I'm gonna forget. I can't remember it. So, but it was a short little lecture about pantheism, and one thing that pantheists don't believe in is individuality. They would say all of the problems with the world are our setting out to be individuals, right? So our personal selves are the problems with the world. And in as much as we are one, connected, and we live as though we're connected, meaning surrendering every desire, there's no wants, none of those individual things. That's what the world was designed to be.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to all be living in this divine connection with one another, and individuality destroys that. But here in this pantheist promo of a movie, the hero has to make an individual choice to do something that disrupts the very nature of their connection with the animals, right? Because you're only supposed to have one of those. Well, now he's had two,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's supposed to choose you. Well, he just jumped on top of it and made it choose him. And now he's the person who saves everybody.
Right. Yeah.
Because in a pantheistic worldview, you can't have a hero. There can't be a hero because there can be no desire. There can be no individuality. There can be no, I'm going to do this even though it upends the connection right now. There can be no true
because everyone's equal.
Good.
Yeah,
because everyone's equal. Yeah, I can't.
You can't overcome. You
right.
can't There's no ability or capacity to overcome anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when you lose that transcendence, even down to like just individual decisions, the ability to be an individual, you lose that heroic nature, and the movie would not have succeeded or been a complete story unless it included that, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So, and that tells us something about the human heart and the human condition, that if that movie didn't do that, they never acknowledge that they did that, but if you watch it, that's exactly what they did,
mm-hmm.
and they had to.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, detrimental to the plot of the movie.
Right. So some other things on that pantheism, just, we know through Scripture. So that whole logic was just kind of the fault of pantheism in and of itself. But in Scripture, we know that there is one God above all. There is no other God. So Isaiah 44:6 talks about this. I'm going to flip there real quick and actually read it so I don't butcher it.
I'm right there. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Let's see here. So it says, so Isaiah 44:6 says, "Thus says the Lord, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, Lord of hosts, I am the first and I am the last. Besides me there is no God."
Right. There is no God. Besides the one God, the Lord of Israel, the God of Israel, Jehovah, Yahweh, there is no other God. There's not one existence. There's one transcendent God who is above any god of man, any deity we can craft in our minds. There is one God. And Deuteronomy 6:4 communicates this as well, which Deuteronomy is, a retelling of the law. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. There is one God. There is only one God. And then the other aspect of that is, yes, there is one God. Jesus is God, right? Jesus is God. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word. The Word was God, and the Word was with God." And then later in John 1:14, he says, "The Word became flesh." So who is that speaking of? It's speaking of Jesus Christ. That Jesus is God, pre-existing for all of eternity, and he entered into human to human history. He entered, that's incarnation. He came as a man into the world, though he's been God for all of eternity.
Right, and to support that further, 1 Timothy 2, 5 says, "For there is one God, there is one mediator between God and man, the man Jesus Christ."
Mm-hmm. And then John chapter 10, verse 29, it says, starting in verse 29, this is Jesus speaking. This is kind of the end of a conversation. It's kind of a weird spot to start, but my Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. And then verse 30 says, I and the Father are one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this? So John 10:28, I give them eternal life, and they never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. No one will snatch them out of my hand, Jesus says. 10:29, my Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. So no one will snatch them out of Jesus' hand. No one will snatch them out of the Father's hand. And then verse 30, I and the Father are one. Jesus is God. Jesus is divine, and he is transcendent above all things. The Bible talks about him as the name above all names, the name above every other name. So this we can refute pantheism just by, because it collapses in on itself.
Yeah,
because the logic of it collapses in on itself. But furthermore, we can know and be confident that the Bible clearly communicates that there is one God, and even further than that, that Jesus is God, that Jesus is divine. What thoughts do you have?
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah, that was rapid fire, man. That was a lot. If you guys have any questions and you're listening along, if you're on YouTube or if you're listening, and you've got questions or you want to amen that, hit up the comment section, and light the comment section up. That's good stuff. That's really good stuff.
Got one more thing to throw out there.
Do it. Let's do it.
About the movie. This is directly about the movie. So I mentioned when I was talking about Jesus, the Word became flesh. That's called the incarnation. That's Jesus becoming man, coming into the world as a baby, entering into our situation. And you could say that the movie Avatar, the hero in Avatar, also was something unlike the people that he came to save. But he became like the people that he had to rescue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jake Sully is not Navi. He's not that species, right?
No.
He's different.
Yep.
He's unique. But yet he had to become them, incarnation. He had to become incarnate as a Navi to be their hero.
Right. Yep.
And so that's just a glimpse. And I don't, maybe the movie does that on purpose and maybe it doesn't. It's definitely a very spiritual, religious movie. So, I don't know if it's on purpose or not, but it's kind of a glimpse of that same type of story arc that we see in Christ.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great way to sum it up. I'm trying to think. Do you, I guess there's kind of a parallel too with that as, the people that Jake befriend who are there for culture and education of the Navi people, and I mean, there's a little bit of a discipleship that happens there, which is interesting. But yeah, man, I think the movie's really good. I really like it.
I enjoy it.
I like it a lot. And I think there's a lot of parallels that you can make, and pull out. It's definitely a good movie to talk about the Bible. So, yeah. Do you have anything else?
No, I'm good. I think we're, good movie. I'd encourage people to watch it. I don't think it's quite as good as its reputation.
No?
It's like, no, I mean, technically speaking, it is. Like the technology and the special effects. I mean, I don't know if there's even been a movie since that reaches the level that this one does. But again, the story is just Pocahontas.
Yeah.
So I mean, that kind of, I don't know. It's not the classic with both visuals and story that like The Dark Knight or
Original.
some other movies. Yeah, even Inception or things like that. But it is very good.
But
It
you could
is
make,
worth
I mean, you
watching.
could make that argument for any movie recently. I mean, probably within the last 10 years?
Probably.
I mean, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not been a lot of original content, even shortly before COVID.
Somebody
Long
should
time
like.
before COVID.
I don't want to do this, and I doubt you do, but somebody should watch Pocahontas and then watch Avatar, and then make note of everything that's identical.
Yeah, if this YouTube video gets, what do you think? What do you
I
think?
don't know.
5,000 likes?
I don't know.
If it gets 5,000 likes,
you
if you
throw out
guys
a number.
lasted this long and you heard that challenge, and you want us to do, that, if we'll do that if this video gets 5,000 likes, 5,000 likes, we'll go scene by scene, second by second, and we will make note
Compare to
of
Pocahontas.
we will make note of the similarities between Pocahontas and
Yeah.
Avatar.
Isn't there a scene in Pocahontas where John Smith and Pocahontas are like running on a tree branch, kind of like it's kind of the big nature scene.
Yeah.
That would almost be like the flying scene in Avatar.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay.
Lots
I think I said I don't want to do that though.
You don't want to do that, but if this
I
gets
will,
5,000 likes, we'll do it.
Yeah.
So cool, guys. We want to thank you for hanging out with us for the last hour and 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and we really appreciate it. You can find us on social media. We're gonna end up on Twitter soon. I delegated that to Nick, so we will let you know when that gets completed. We are on Facebook, Instagram. If you want to, obviously, if you're listening on a podcast platform, we're also on YouTube. Head on over there, subscribe if you like the content. If you found us on YouTube, we're anywhere that, if you would rather listen to an audio podcast, we're everywhere that you can consume podcast content. If you would like to if you would like to support our podcast financially, we do have a Patreon page that will be linked in our YouTube channel description. It'll be linked in the description of this video as well, so it's easy to find it. Nick, do you have any final comments for our listeners? Anything that you want to, pressing that you want to lay on their hearts or anything like that?
I do not. I think this was good.
I do too.
I hope the the conversation about having conversations was helpful.
Yeah, definitely bear good fruit
and beneficial.
Yeah, I do too. I guess my final thoughts would be encouraged, have confidence in being a Christian. We serve and we worship the one true God, and you definitely should not, what would be the word? I don't think waver, fear, or be hesitant. You should find strength in the power of the truth that we serve the one true God, and Scripture backs it up, and it hasn't been disproven yet, so it's got that going for it. Thanks, guys. We really appreciate it. We will see you on the next one.